"You were built for quiet rooms, Dessa. I need someone built for the spotlight." That was what Theron Vale, the 42-year-old husband of Dessa Rourke Vale and vice president of original programming at Meridian Vantage Group, said while standing at the edge of a freshly dug grave on a grey October morning. He said it while reaching into the inside pocket of his coat. He said it while producing a sealed envelope and holding it out to his wife across her father's casket as if he were handing her something he had simply changed his mind about keeping. Dessa Rourke Vale, 36, the woman the world knew only as a quiet philanthropic advisor with a fondness for early mornings and old books, looked at the envelope for a long moment without taking it. Then she looked at Zara Lennox, the 30-year-old freelance talent strategist hired to consult on Meridian Vantage's spring lineup, who was standing 12 feet away in a fitted charcoal dress and a delicate black fascinator, close enough to Theron that no one at the burial would mistake her for a colleague. Dessa took the envelope. She opened it. Divorce papers, prepared 6 days earlier. 6 days earlier, her father, Cormac Rourke, had still been alive in the hospice on Clement Street, asking the nurse whether his daughter had eaten lunch. Dessa looked up at Theron. Her voice came out low and very steady. "You chose today." Theron's face did not break. He said her father was gone now, and pretending was exhausting, and he needed a partner who could stand beside him in the rooms that actually mattered. He said she had always preferred to stay invisible, and he had decided to stop waiting for that to change. He turned and walked back toward the cars with Zara at his side. He believed he was finally free of a woman too small and too quiet for the life he intended to have. What Theron did not know was that Meridian Vantage Group, the company that paid his salary, approved his projects, and printed his name on its letterhead, had belonged to that woman since the day her mother died. "The badge Dessa used to enter Meridian Vantage's private floors," said legacy consultant. It had said that for 4 years, ever since her parents, Cormac and Isadora Rourke, the founders of one of the most respected independent media groups in the country, had decided that protection was more important than visibility. Meridian Vantage had started in a rented office above a dry cleaner in Portland in the late 1990s. Cormac had been a failed journalist who believed failed journalists made the best editors. Isadora had been a designer who believed good design was the only argument that never needed repeating. Together they had built Meridian Vantage from a regional literary quarterly into a full-scale digital media group, valued today at just under $450 million, with publishing arms, a documentary division, and a streaming platform that 3 major studios had tried and failed to acquire. The ownership structure was complicated on purpose. Rourke Signal Trust, a private holding entity, controlled the majority stake. Only a small circle of attorneys, finance officers, and board members close to the founding family knew that the trust's active beneficiary and controlling authority had passed entirely to Dessa after Isadora's death in February. Dessa's badge said legacy consultant because her parents had spent decades watching what happened when powerful people discovered what someone was worth. They had seen partnerships dissolve into litigation overnight. They had watched executives they trusted try to root around them using the very contracts they had signed. They had built the trust structure not out of paranoia, but out of experience. And so Dessa moved through Meridian Vantage's halls in plain clothes with an old canvas bag. And the receptionist nodded, and the executive sometimes forgot she was in the room, and everyone assumed she was doing something quiet and harmless in connection with the founding family's legacy. Theron had known, in the vague way he knew most things about her family, that Dessa's parents had old media investments. He had never asked what that meant in specific numbers. He had married her 5 years ago when he was a mid-level acquisitions editor with good instincts and a lot of ambition and almost no professional leverage. She had seemed to him like a woman who would be steady, stable, supportive in a way that did not demand anything loud in return. He had not been entirely wrong about those qualities. He had simply stopped valuing them somewhere around the time his name started appearing on industry lists. The morning before the burial, Sasha Whale, 37, Dessa's closest friend since graduate school and the only person outside the legal circle who knew the full shape of Dessa's loneliness, arrived at the house with food Dessa wouldn't eat and a willingness to sit in silence that most people didn't have. Dessa was standing at the kitchen window in the clothes she had worn to the hospice the night before. Theron was not home. He had left 2 voicemails, both brief, both mentioning the annual industry dinner he couldn't cancel. He didn't answer when the nurse called, Dessa said, when she finally turned around. He was with her. It was not a question. She said it the way people say things they have known for a long time, and simply stopped working around. Sasha kept her voice even. "What do you need from me today?" Dessa thought about her father, asking the nurse whether she'd eaten. She thought about Cormac's voice from the last clear conversation they'd had 2 weeks before the end, when he had been awake enough to hold her hand and tell her slowly that the transfer documents were ready, that Archer Pemberton had everything, that the company was hers now, fully, irrevocably, and that she should never let anyone treat the Rourke name like an inconvenience. "I need to get through today," Dessa said. "And then I need to know what Theron has been doing inside the company." Bet Koss, the 54-year-old chief financial officer of Meridian Vantage, and a woman who had survived 3 industry sessions and 2 hostile board maneuvers, had called Dessa the evening before the burial with her voice controlled in the specific way it got, when something was both urgent and delicate. "There are expense irregularities," Bet said. "I've been watching them for 6 weeks. I didn't want to bring them to you while your father was still in hospice." Dessa had stood in the hospice hallway outside Cormac's room and listened. The irregularities were tied to the Frequency, the flagship digital series that Theron had championed for the past year and which Meridian Vantage had greenlit for full production. Luxury accommodation charges filed under creative development, a consulting retainer paid to an LLC that Bet's team could not verify as a legitimate vendor. Promotional contracts approved through Quade Fenwick, Meridian Vantage's 48-year-old director of strategic partnerships, without the standard finance sign-off. And the LLC, Bet said after a pause, is registered to a name associated with Zara Lennox. The hallway outside the hospice had been very quiet. "I know," Dessa said. "She didn't mean these specific things. She meant I knew it was going to be something like this." "Don't move on any of it yet," she said. "Preserve everything. I need to get through the burial." Bet said yes, and her voice carried the particular weight of a woman who respected grief but respected justice more. Nyal Kaur, the 40-year-old head of digital compliance at Meridian Vantage, had been hired by Cormac Rourke 7 years ago because Cormac believed the people best suited to protecting a company's integrity were the ones who did not confuse silence with safety. Nyal was meticulous and loyal in the particular way of someone who had never been asked to compromise. He called Dessa the evening of the burial, after Theron had walked away from the grave and Sasha had held the umbrella over Dessa on the walk back to the car. "There are things you need to see," Nyal said, "before anyone has the chance to alter them." Dessa looked at the cemetery road ahead of her, empty in the grey afternoon light. "Tonight," she said. The Meridian Vantage building looked different after midnight. In the building's private compliance suite, Bet and Nyal had already set up when Dessa arrived with Sasha and Archer Pemberton, 63, the Rourke family attorney who had drafted the original trust documents and who carried himself with the composure of a man who had seen worse and still prevailed. Archer placed a recorder on the table. "This is preparation, not reaction," he said. "Everything from this point is evidence." Niall opened the first file. Badge records. Zara Lennox had been granted restricted access to the editorial vaults on 3 separate nights over the past 2 months. Her visitor credentials had standard daytime clearance only. The after-hours access had been approved through Theron's executive account. Bet pulled up the expense trail. The LLC payments totaled just over $140,000 across 6 months, categorized under vendor services, all tied to the Frequency. None of the deliverables listed in the contracts corresponded to any verifiable work product in the production records. Then Archer set a single piece of paper on the table. This one came from outside. It was a letter, 3 paragraphs, careful and formal, from a 26-year-old writer named Emmett Delaney, who had spent the past 8 months trying to reach anyone at Meridian Vantage who would listen. Emmett's original manuscript was called Parallel Station, a novel about a young archivist who discovers her institution has been systematically suppressing the work of the people it claimed to protect. He had submitted it through a development mentorship program Theron administered. Theron had called it promising, had asked for a revised draft, had gone quiet for months. 6 months later, Meridian Vantage announced The Frequency, an original digital series about an investigator who uncovers institutional corruptions inside a legacy media organization. Different title, expanded cast, polished concept, same bones, same emotional spine, same ending. Emmett had written in his kitchen at 2 a.m. on a laptop held together with packing tape. Dessa read the letter twice. She thought about her mother standing in a cramped office on a winter afternoon, kneeling in front of a young writer who had driven 4 hours to ask for help after a studio had taken her story and called it development material. When someone takes a person's work, Isadora had told Dessa afterward, They don't just take the money. They take the proof that person was here. Dessa put the letter down. We protect him too, she said. Whatever we do at the summit, Emmett's name comes first. Archer nodded. Bet closed the laptop. Niall said nothing, but his jaw was set. They had 16 days before the Meridian Vantage Annual Creative Summit, the company's largest industry event, where publishing partners, streaming investors, independent creators, and press gathered each year to see what Meridian Vantage was building next. This year's summit was anchored by the Frequency's official series premiere and Theron's keynote, which Quaid had been promoting in trade publications as the signal of Meridian Vantage's next chapter. Dessa worked quietly. She signed the paperwork that removed Theron's access to the restricted production archives, explained to the IT department as a standard pre-event security update. She signed the authorization for outside counsel to review the expense records, the vendor contracts, and the badge logs. She signed the authorization for Niall to prepare a verified presentation package for the summit's opening. Theron, who had moved out of the house the week after the burial and was staying in a rental Zara had found, noticed none of it. He was occupied with the keynote. He had been photographed at an industry cocktail event with Zara at his side, and the photo had run in 2 trade publications under soft, favorable captions. Fenella Stride, 33, a media columnist who had been paid through one of the Shell vendor contracts for favorable placement, had written a piece about Theron's vision for independent media that same week. The piece called Dessa, obliquely, a private person who preferred to stay out of the spotlight. Niall added the piece's metadata and Fenella's payment records to the evidence file. Pace Harlow, 44, Theron's closest professional friend and a co-producer on The Frequency, called Theron the night before the summit. Accounting asked me about the Delaney file, Pace said, about the submission records. Theron's voice flattened. Emmett Dulain got a development credit. That's what I told them. Then, that's the answer. Theron, if someone's been looking at... Nobody is looking at anything, Theron said. Tomorrow night is mine. Let it be mine. Emmett Dulain arrived at Meridian Vantage the afternoon before the summit with his original manuscript under his arm and the look of someone who had spent too many months being told to be grateful for the small door he had been given. His jacket was slightly too big. His shoes were clean but old. Dessa met him in a conference room without a window. I almost didn't come, he said. People like him always know how to make you disappear quietly. Dessa sat across from him. She did not tell him everything. She told him enough. My mother built this company to protect the people that bigger voices tried to erase, she said. That's still what it's for. Emmett looked at the table, then at her. Will you protect my work? He asked. Yes, Dessa said. He opened his manuscript to the first page and pushed it across the table. She placed her hand on it with care. The night of the Meridian Vantage Annual Creative Summit was warm for October. The venue, a converted industrial space in the arts district that the company rented each year, was filled with the particular energy of an industry gathering that believed it was witnessing something historic. Streaming executives, publishing partners, independent creators, investors in well-cut jackets, rows of chairs in front of a stage-wide screen, press along the sides. Theron arrived to a small cluster of cameras. He wore a dark suit and the expression of a man who had decided to stop apologizing for wanting things. Zara was beside him, in a deep burgundy dress. Fenella was there too, phone raised, already composing the caption. Inside, Stanton Lyle, 61, a longtime board member who had been quietly pushing to dilute the Rourke Trust's voting authority in favor of executive-led governance, sat near the center aisle with the polished calm of a man who believed the night would go as planned. He had not been informed of what was in the summit's opening package. Dessa did not arrive through the main entrance. She came through the production corridor with Archer beside her, and Bet behind, Sasha close, Niall ahead. She wore a dark green dress, no jewelry except her mother's ring on her right hand and her father's watch beneath her sleeve. She looked like someone attending a memorial. At the side of the stage, she found Emmett. He was standing with his manuscript in his hands again, watching the crowd through a gap in the curtain. I keep thinking I should leave, he said. Dessa looked at the crowd, then at him. She said, this is your story too. Emmett's hands steadied. The lights went down. Carrie Sven, 41, the summit's host, welcomed the audience and introduced Theron. The applause was generous, and Theron walked to the microphone with the ease of a man who had been waiting for exactly this. He spoke about vision. He spoke about the courage it took to build something in an industry resistant to change. He looked at Zara in the front row and thanked her by name for understanding what ambition required. In the production booth, Niall looked at Archer. Archer texted Dessa one word, "Ready." Dessa typed back, "Begin." The screen behind Theron went dark without warning. Theron turned, his smile disappeared. The Meridian Vantage corporate legal seal appeared in place of the Summit logo. A single line of text beneath it read, "Before tonight's programming, Meridian Vantage Group is required to address verified misconduct connected to this production." The room went absolutely still. The first document appeared full screen, a vendor contract for consulting services, the LLC name, the verified connection to Zara Lennox, the total payments, the absence of any deliverable in 6 months of invoicing. A second document. Expense approval signed by Quaid Fenwick for accommodation charges filed under creative development. A third. Badge access logs for the restricted editorial vaults, after-hours timestamps, Theron's authorization code on each entry. Quaid stood in the third row. He said, "This is being taken out of context." 2 members of Meridian Vantage's security team moved toward him with the practiced quiet of people who had been briefed. "Please sit down," one of them said. Quaid sat. The screen changed. A header appeared, "Original work review, parallel station and the frequency." Side by side, 2 documents. Emmett's submission receipt, timestamp 22 months ago. Beside it, selected passages from the frequency's production script. The room leaned forward. Some people reached for their programs as though the answer might be printed there. An email appeared. "Theron to Pace, the kid's framework is usable. Strip the literary voice and repitch the premise for streaming." Another. "Pace to Theron, what do we give him?" Theron's response, "A development credit. He should be grateful we gave it any shape at all." Fenella's phone slipped from her hand. Zara stood, her chair scraping. She looked at the screen, then at Theron. Theron did not look at her. He was staring at himself, his own words in white letters on a dark screen, watching what he had written in private become the largest thing in the room. Then a video clip played. Footage from the editorial vault corridor. Zara with her temporary badge, the timestamp. Theron visible at the end of the hallway, jacket over his arm, watching the door close behind her. Pace stood and moved toward the exit. A legal aide stepped into the aisle and handed him a sealed envelope. The final slide read, "Effective immediately, by authority of the controlling ownership of Rourke Signal Trust and the Meridian Vantage Group Board Ethics Committee, the following individuals are suspended pending full investigation. Theron Vale, Quaid Fenwick, Fenella Stride, in connection with paid placement of company-funded media coverage." The silence after that was the kind that comes from recognition, not shock. Theron finally turned from the screen. His eyes moved across the room until they found her. Dessa walked in from the side aisle. No spotlight followed her. She didn't need one. She walked steadily, past the rows of seated guests who turned to watch, past Zara, who had stopped moving entirely, past Stanton Lyle, who had gone the color of old concrete, and she stopped at the edge of the stage. She did not go to the microphone. She stopped beside Emmett. That single choice told the room everything it needed to know. Dessa faced the audience. "Meridian Vantage Group was founded by my parents on the belief that this industry should have at least one place where a story couldn't be taken from the person who wrote it. Tonight's summit is suspended. The frequency will not be released under its current credit until authorship, rights, and compensation have been fully corrected. Emmett Dulane is the originating creator of the work that became this series. His name and his rights will be restored by this company. All financial irregularities connected to this production have been preserved under legal hold and referred to outside counsel." She paused. Theron stepped toward her. His voice came out quieter than she had expected. "Dessa, we can talk about this." She looked at him. "You told me I was built for quiet rooms," she said. "You were right that I preferred them. My mother designed them. My father protected them. I stayed quiet inside them for 5 years because I believed you were worth protecting." Theron's mouth opened. "Never asked who I was," she said. "You only decided what I was worth." The applause started in the back of the room, not loud at first. 1 person, then 3, then an entire section rising, not for the company name on the screen or the legal authority in the documents, but for the young writer standing at the edge of the stage with his manuscript in his hands, and for the woman who had finally stopped pretending the room belonged to someone else. Theron stood at the foot of the stage with no microphone and no audience and no understanding of when exactly the floor had shifted beneath him. Archer stepped forward and placed a sealed envelope in his hands. A second went to Quaid, a third to Fenella, who was already trying to gather her things. Dessa turned back to Emmett. "Meridian Vantage recognizes you as the originating writer," she said clearly enough for the room to carry it. "We will not move forward without correcting that." Emmett pressed one hand over his mouth. He nodded. The weeks that followed were not simple. They never are. Theron's suspension became a formal termination after outside counsel confirmed both the expense fraud and the intellectual property violations. His attorneys argued for a settlement. Archer prepared for litigation. The marital agreement held exactly as Cormac had written it, and Theron left the marriage with no claim to the trust assets he had never bothered to understand. Quaid resigned before the board vote. Fenella's column lost its Meridian Vantage Press credentials within the month. Pace, Harlow gave a full statement to outside counsel. He had known about Emmett's manuscript earlier than his emails suggested. He had said nothing because Theron had made it clear that the people who looked the other way were the ones who got producing credits. The statement cost him the credit. He surrendered it without much argument. Stanton Lyle was removed from the board. Not dramatically, not publicly. The Ethics Committee's report on his unauthorized attempt to access the trust identity files was enough. Emmett Doolan signed a revised contract. His name would be primary credit on the series, now retitled to its original name. The advance was real. The legal protection was in writing. His hands didn't shake when he signed. And Dessa stopped entering Meridian Vantage through the side door. The first morning she walked through the main lobby. The security desk attendant she had passed for 4 years looked up and greeted her the same way he always had. Except that this time the greeting meant something different. He had always known her face. He had simply never known what it meant. Dessa walked past the wall of framed prints, first editions and documentary posters from the decades her parents had spent building this place. She stopped in front of a photograph she had seen 1,000 times without really looking at it. Her mother at a production table in 1998, holding a proof of the first issue, looking directly at the camera with the specific expression of someone who knows exactly what they have made. Dessa touched the edge of the frame. At the first full board meeting, Emmett sat across from her with a revised production timeline in front of him. His new jacket fit. His shoes were the same. Afterward, Dessa went alone to the private room where the Frequency's original production materials were archived. She sat in the dark for a while. Not because she needed to grieve anymore. Not exactly. She thought about her father asking whether she had eaten. She thought about her mother kneeling in front of a writer who had driven hours just to have someone confirm that her story was hers. She thought about Theron at the graveside, confident that grief had made her manageable. She reached for her mother's ring. She touched her father's watch beneath her sleeve. "I answered with the truth," she said to no one. The room stayed dark. But for the first time in longer than she could place, the dark did not feel like hiding. It felt like finally being still enough to hear herself think.